Before now, mysteries had never been discussed or uncovered. But now, Contumacious Ant and Atreya are back for a second season. The MO Podcast.
Hello and welcome all into the MO Podcast. You're here with me, Contumacious Ant, and my lovely co-host,
Atreya.
And today we are going to go back to our roots. Now that sounds weird because I was going to just about follow that with murder. It's like not that we started out murdering people.
This isn't a how-to podcast.
Yeah.
But we totally could get away with it.
Yeah, but I mean, I won't go on record. That's just. But this is like the first season, and this is how me and Atreya got talking about. I'm not again. This is going to come out bad, but our love for true crime and serial killers and whatnot. But you can't get on board with them all. As
not all of them. No,
not all of them.
Good portion of them, but not all of them.
Talked about, but yeah, I am going to be talking about the Circleville letters. And what are you going to be talking about?
I'm going to be talking about the 1980s Keddie Cabin Murders.
Okay, so just a little bit of disclaimer. Especially the Keddie Cabin one is a little bit intense, and it is about children being murdered. So if you're not on board with that, and no one's on board with it, what I mean is there could be some graphic descriptions coming up.
Yep.
So just be prepared for that. But we'll start off with the Circleville letters. And this is a very interesting, a very, I don't know what the word is, but it's a weird one. So, in 1976, in Circleville, Ohio, which is about 20 miles south of Columbus, Ohio, Mary Gillespie, who was a school bus driver, received a letter that started out pretty much with, "I know where you live. I've been observing your house and know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it serious." It was basically a poison pen letter. The letter claimed that she was actually having an affair with a Gordon Massey, who was a school superintendent, we don't really have them in England, but he was like a super headmaster, I suppose.
Hey, all headmasters are super.
Well, yeah, but he had like several schools in his district that he went round to. Maybe that's a bit wrong. We're not a headmaster. He was just a manager. He just managed the schools, I suppose.
That's not the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing at all. Shows how much attention I paid in school, doesn't it?
Apparently.
Yeah. She received this letter and she thought nothing much of it. She just put it to the side and didn't do anything. There was no distinguishing identifying marks on this letter. The only thing that it had on it was a postmark from Columbus, Ohio. So she received this letter, did nothing, and just time went by. Shortly afterwards, her husband, Ron Gillespie, received his own letter. Now, this one also contained the line, "If you don't do something to stop this affair, your life will be in danger." So now they're becoming threatening letters rather than just a little bit of blackmail. In another letter that Ron received, he said, "Gillespie, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Make her admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBs."
CBBS?
Because, CB radios, because all the truckers want to hear that. Like Smokey and the Bandit.
I thought it was CBBS, and I was like, I don't think it's appropriate for kids, really.
I don't really know what Ron thought of this. There's not much that we know, because he's received a letter from someone saying his wife's having an affair, and he's still with his wife. He's not like they're both together, because they told 3 other people about these letters. One was Ron's sister, Karen Fresher. Oh, she's a right one. Ron's brother-in-law, Paul Fresher, and Paul's sister. And they kind of got together and tried to figure out who it was. And Mary kind of had an idea of who it could be because a few of the letters were signed with a W. And she kind of took a guess that it was William Massey, which was Gordon Massey's son, who she was not having an affair with, but he was writing these letters to her, saying she was having an affair. So that's basically what they did, was they started writing letters to him. So, I mean, I don't know what it cost him in stamps, but...
Maybe he worked at the post office.
Could be. But basically, they sent a few letters of their own, and from what Paul Fresher said, he said, we thought we'd scare the guy. We sent him 4 or 5 letters only. There was no violence in them or anything, just that we knew who he was and what he was doing, and we sent him the letters. So they just sent Gordon Massey's son these letters because they just assumed it was him. Just get your facts straight before you just start sending letters willy-nilly.
For real. I mean, if it was him, wouldn't he just tell his dad instead of writing letters?
This is it. I really don't understand this whole case, to be honest with you, because it's just letter. I mean, I know it was the 70s, well, nearly the 80s, but still, why don't you just speak to the people rather than...
Yeah.
But anyway, this actually worked for a little bit of time and the letters stopped. But then Ron received a phone call on August 19th, 1977. He had an argument over the phone with the person on the other end of the line. He grabbed his gun and his car keys and then left in a hurry. Now, he barely got to the end of the street, and in that short space of time, he'd managed to fire one shot, lose control at an intersection, hit a tree and die.
Wow.
So either he was really upset at something, or because the threats which were made in other letters, they were actually watching his vehicle and they knew what vehicle he was going in, and this telephone call kind of goaded him into doing something, and they were watching and waiting, ready to pounce.
Oof. Psycho.
Yeah. Apparently, at first, the police agreed that there was foul play, but they ruled out a suspect and they declared that it was an accident. They also noted that he was 1.5 times over the legal limit, which is quite surprising because he was looking after his children at this time. His wife was out of town, so it was just him looking after he had young children, and he wasn't a heavy drinker. All his friends and families said he wasn't a heavy drinker. Mm. So there's a little bit of questions there.
Mm-hmm.
More letters started to arrive, but most of the residents of Circleville received these letters. It wasn't just these few couple of people. It wasn't Mary, Gillespie, Gordon, Ron. It was most of the occupants of this town were kind of getting letters accusing this. Now they were accusing the sheriff of a cover-up. They were accusing a prosecutor of murdering a teacher because he got her pregnant.
Wow.
So there's a lot of letters flying around here with a lot of accusations that are going on.
Wow, there's a whole fucking set of curtain twitchers there that need to mind their own business.
So this is it. There's a lot of gossiping going on here and pushing these letters out. And a lot of business owners received letters and they handed them into the police. They weren't making threats at them directly, so it was just pure speculation about what this person had done with that person kind of thing. The only kind of threats that were coming in were against Mary Gillespie and Gordon Massey because they were having an affair and they weren't being open and honest about it. Now, Mary actually admitted to the affair, but she only claimed it started after Ron's death. Now, the reason Ron was looking after his kids on the day of his death and his wife was out of town is because his wife was going to Florida, and with her sister-in-law and another friend, and she told them that Gordon was going to be joining them in Florida.
So she wasn't away on a dirty weekend?
No, she kind of was away on a dirty weekend, but she went with friends and she let them know. But this was the day of his death, so she claimed that she only started this affair after he died. So unless she knew he was going to die that day and that was the first time they got together, it's a bit interesting. So when this affair came out, Mary managed to keep her job, but Gordon was transferred to a new school district. Then a little bit of time passes and nothing really happens. Then in 1983, threatening signs started to appear along Mary's bus route, and they were concerning her and her daughter. Her daughter was openly being threatened in these signs. I don't know what the signs said, but it was enough to piss Mary off. And she, on the 7th of February at 3:30, she pulled over in front of a sign on a fence post, and she actually ripped the sign down. Now, this sign was booby-trapped. Behind the sign was a cardboard box which contained a .25 pistol.
Jesus.
And it was on the trigger. There was a piece of twine tied to the trigger, and it was tied to the poster. So if someone tried to take the poster off, it should have gone off. But for whatever reason, luckily, it didn't go off. And obviously the police were involved, and even though on the gun someone had attempted to rub off the serial numbers, once it was sent to their lab, they could see the serial numbers, and they managed to trace it back to her brother-in-law, Paul Fresner. Pretty much, well, the sheriff conducted a handwriting analysis test on Paul, which basically involved the sheriff giving him one of these letters that was sent and asking him to write out exactly the same thing. I'm no expert, but I'm not 100% sure that's how it's done. Because there's handwriting experts for a reason. And at no point do I think this sheriff is a handwriting expert. And even if you are copying something, there's going to be similarities because you're copying something.
Yeah.
So it should have been inadmissible, but this was actually put into evidence, and Paul was arrested for attempted murder. Now, he went on trial in October 1983 for attempted murder, but not for sending threatening letters. So it was just for kind of the booby trap. He was found guilty and given the maximum sentence, which was 7 to 25 years. Now, that should be the end of the story. Got the man and everything should stop. But the letters kept coming.
What? Okay.
Now, they were still accusing the sheriff of a cover-up. The sheriff even said he knows who's doing it, but he was told not to elaborate on that. It was pretty much, he thought it was Paul sending these letters from prison. And after complaints from the sheriff, the warden put Paul in solitary confinement. But the letters still kept coming. Paul even received a letter in prison which said, "Shame how things worked out, but better you than me. The sheriff says you did it, but we know better, don't we?"
Poor Paul.
So he's basically in solitary confinement, and he's getting this letter that says, dick, kind of thing.
We framed you.
Yeah.
Na, 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 na.
And all these letters were postmarked from Columbus still. But Paul was in Lima, Ohio, so even if he was sending letters, they would have had to go through post office. And bearing in mind, he's in prison, so anything you send in or out of prison is looked at by the guards. They check your mail. It's like prison guard 101 kind of thing.
Yeah.
And after a while, the warden was... because the sheriff kept complaining about Paul was sending all these letters, the warden actually wrote to Paul's ex-wife and said, there's no way it can be him because he's been in solitary confinement and we're reading his mail anyway. So at his first parole hearing, so he's served 7 years, and this was his first parole hearing. And he was denied because the letters were still being sent. He was denied parole because the letters were still being sent.
What? That makes no sense.
Even though the warden has said this, there's a private investigator who Paul's niece hired to try and get to the bottom of this, put in a character statement in his parole thing, and I'll read it out in a bit. Saying it can't be him. But the parole board said no, it's still you, so that's it. 2 days after the hearing, Paul received a letter, again from the writer, and it says, now, when are you going to believe you aren't going to get out of there? I told you 2 years ago, when we set them up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all.
Wow.
So, Paul was released after 10 years. He served 10 years in prison for this. And the writer's never been found. There was letters sent there was reports of up until 2003. And Unexpected Mysteries, the television show, they were doing a special on the Circleville Writer, and they received a letter that said, don't come to Ohio, drop this case, kind of thing, a threatening letter. They still went on and did it. But
does that mean you're going to get a letter as well?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll get an email. Maybe they've upgraded. I don't know. But there's so much weird stuff in this case, because Paul wrote to the FBI once he was out of prison to try and clear his name with a lot of questions about the evidence and what went on at his trial. So Paul was advised, really, I don't think he was not allowed, but he was advised not to give his own testimony at the trial, which he actually said was one of the biggest mistakes, because he basically, if he would have been given the chance, he would have told his side of the story. His side of the story weren't really represented. The handwriting analysis is it's not even a thing that they did. They just looked at it and went, yeah, it looks close enough. Yeah.
Idiots.
The affidavits that they have in the evidence, they weren't signed, and they were actually notarized by the lead prosecution. Affidavits of evidence or witness testimony entered into the evidence record were notarized by lead prosecutor.
Wow.
How wrong is that?
Wow.
That makes no sense at all. This was a lead prosecutor who was accused in some of the letters of killing a teacher because he got her pregnant.
Ah, right, okay. He really shouldn't have had anything to say at all.
Yeah, take that as you will. He's actually now a judge on the appeals circuit in Ohio. But
oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's all evidence, because this is what Paul wrote to the FBI with, and is what he said. There was only 39 letters were used as evidence in the trial, yet over 1,000 were wrote and received. The excuse of taking out the rest of the letters where they didn't pertain to the case. But it was pretty much all the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think because he was accused of attempted murder rather than the writing threatening letters. I think that was one of the ways that they managed to get around that.
Crooked.
But on the day of the booby trap was discovered, Paul had an alibi that placed him at home between 12:30 and 4:30, and it was discovered at 3:30. Unless it's been there for 3 hours, he's not put it up. And one piece of evidence that was actually in the sheriff's file but was never brought to trial was 20 minutes before Mary had actually got to the booby trap site, a yellow El Camino car, bright yellow El Camino car, was seen, and a large man with sandy hair was stood there. And as this bus approached, as this witness approached, he turned his body and his face away so he wouldn't be recognised.
Wow.
Now, if you've ever seen Paul, he's got dark hair and a tash.
Nothing like the guy in the yellow car.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that are kind of wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two kind of culprits or two suspects that have been talked about in this. And one was David Longberry, who was a school bus driver who worked alongside Mary, and he had a soft spot for her. He asked her out, even though she was married. Don't know what's going on.
Dear God.
But she rebuffed him. She said no.
Ovs.
Then she got with Gordon, and maybe he was jealous. One of the bits of evidence that this could be him is that a lot of the letters were involved with school issues, so it's something that he'd know quite a lot about.
Mm-hmm.
He felt spurned, so maybe he had an issue with that as well. It does have to be noted that in 1999 he did go on the run after raping an 11-year-old girl.
Wow.
And was found dead a few years later. So he was the right one, really.
Apparently.
So he's one that people have pointed at. And another one is Karen Sue Sorek, which is Paul's ex-wife. And, ooh, she's a right one.
She does sound like a right one. Like, that is a pretty far-fetched way to go to get back at your ex.
So basically, what Martin Yant, who was the private investigative journalist, he wrote to the parole board with a kind of character witness for Paul. And in it, he said Paul was very upstanding, he was very forthcoming, he was very honest with me. But in 22 years, I don't think I've met an individual as so consumed with such a rational hatred for another and a willingness to say anything, no matter how provably false, to defame him. That's how he described Paul's
Karen.
wife, yeah.
Oh, so Karen really was a Karen.
Yeah. So basically, he said, like, he believes that she will manipulate whoever it takes to keep Paul in prison. Now, what had happened in their divorce, because Paul found out she was having an affair, she basically lost everything. So she lost the house, she lost custody of the kids. She actually was living on Mary's land in a trailer home. So
she was pretty pissed off.
Yeah. And while she was living there, she did actually say to Mary that she thought Paul was the letter writer.
Just dropping that in there, plant the seed, watch it grow.
Exactly. And the thing is, as well, is that after Ron died, so these began in 1976, then after Ron died, there was bits and bats, but there was never anything until 1983. Now, 1983 is kind of the time that they got divorced. So it's one of them that maybe David Longberry started this because he was jealous and he wanted to make Mary pay for rebuffing him, and maybe, and then as an opportunity came back, because as soon as Paul went to jail, she got everything back. She got the house, she got the kids, she even got Paul's pension.
Whoa.
So once he was in prison, she got everything because obviously he was a wrong'un, and that's she was kind of pissed off at that, really.
Yeah, I feel like David is more plausible to start it because it seems like a really elaborate way to get back at your ex. Like, it's not just like, framing him. It's finding out all the information about all these different people. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, could you be asked?
Yeah.
So I feel, I fancy David for this one.
Yeah.
And maybe.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think maybe even it could be half and half. Maybe David started it, and then Karen, just because it was as she can be as manipulative as she kind of wants to be. And one of the things that Paul said, he said, even though it was his gun, he said he kept it in the garage and he'd not seen it for years because he doesn't use it, he doesn't need it. Would Karen know that he's kept it in the garage? Would she know where it is?
You would assume so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Paul's an angel in this. He was supposed to be a little bit of a tin hat specialist. I don't really think. I just think it's bizarre how there was a lot of police procedure not followed. A lot of people's minds got changed over Ron's death, and that's another thing. Ron fired a bullet. He fired one bullet before he died, and it's never been accounted for. There was no bullet holes in the car. They don't know where it was, but he had gunpowder residue on him, and there was one bullet gone from the chamber. But they don't know where it went. And this is one of the things. This is one of the things that Paul kind of said when he came out of prison. He said, "It's nothing to do with me now because I've moved on. That's not my family anymore. But someone needs to look at where that bullet went.
Yeah.
Who did he? Because he fired at someone." And especially after just walking out the house, it was literally, apparently it was to the end of the road. He was out the house less than 5 minutes, and he's fired a bullet.
I mean, presumably the only reason that you would fire a gun is if somebody else was pointing a gun at you. You wouldn't just somebody come up to you in the street and call you a name or something. Like, hey, fat ass, or whatever, you wouldn't shoot them. Presumably, it's a life or death thing, and it's if somebody is pointing a gun at you.
Yeah. You'd assume it's shoot or be shot kind of thing.
Yeah.
He was still in his car. The letters that were there that he was sent said to him, "You've got a red and white pickup. We know what car you've got."
So they presumably knew exactly where he lived, what he was doing at all times.
Yeah.
Because they were following him around in the car as well.
Exactly. So it's. There's so many like skeevy people in this that just.
It sounds like there was corrupt people in the court proceedings as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is that what Paul did say in his letter to the FBI is he did say that Sheriff Radcliffe was trying to become the National Sheriff's Association president, and if he got a win with this case, it would help him.
Okay.
Towards getting that nomination kind of thing. So that was kind of why a few things weren't followed 100%, but...
I'm not being funny, but if you were the person who organised picking the president of the Sheriff's Association, presumably, whether or not he closed the case or not, you would presumably want a sheriff who got the right guy.
Well, yeah. I mean...
Yeah, you closed the case, but you got the wrong guy, so no, we don't want you as our leading figure of the fucking justice system.
Yeah, you'd like to think that, but, I mean... When has evidence ever bothered the police?
Yeah.
The letter writer, no one's found out who it was, but all intents and purposes, Sheriff Radcliffe thinks it was Paul who was the letter writer, even though...
Clearly wasn't.
Yeah, he couldn't have done it when he was in prison.
No.
But yeah, so it's an unsolved mystery.
I guess we'll find out if the writer's still alive and kicking if you get a letter then.
Well, that's it. I mean, we'll see. It'll probably be email.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Well,
rather than handwriting analysis, we'll just do an IP trace. It'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
We know people.
Oh yeah, Netflix people. We soon will do. Watch this space.
We will. We'll be BFFs with Netflix.
Yeah, definitely. So that's the Circleville Writer, and so tell us about the Keddie Cabin.
Okay, so I'll paint a picture, right? So it's the 12th of April, 1981, in a rural resort called Keddie. It's in the Sierra Nevada. And Cabin 28, a young girl called Sheila Sharp, she was 14. She lives in the cabin. She was staying at her friend's overnight. She walks in the next morning and she finds her mother, Sue, her brother, Johnny, and Johnny's friend, Dana, all dead in the living room. She runs back to her friend's cabin, gets her friend's parents. They come back to Cabin 28. Now, Sheila had two little brothers, Rick and Greg. They were in the bedroom with their friend, Justin. All three boys were completely unharmed and apparently had slept through the whole thing. So.
Wow.
Yeah. Brutal. Sue they'd all been bound with electric wire. Sue had been bound and gagged with her own underwear, and she was naked from the waist down. She'd been stabbed in the chest multiple times, and she had her throat slashed. Johnny, he'd also been bound. He had his throat slashed, and Dana had been bound, and he suffered head trauma, and he'd been manually strangled. This was completely, out of the blue. They also had another sister called Tina, and she was missing completely. She'd been in the cabin that night. She was nowhere to be seen. So, a bit of background on the family first. Sue and the kids had lived in Connecticut, and she was in an unhappy marriage, let's say. Her husband was abusive kind of thing, and so she left. She up and moved her and the kids to this Cabin 28 in Keddie. Now, they were on the brink of poverty, pretty much. Sue didn't have a job, and she basically got income, a weekly payment from, I think, her husband's pension or something to that effect. But it was really meager. They were on the bones of their arse, really, really struggling. But everybody, by all accounts, had said that, Sue was a really nice lady and she loved her kids. So this tiny little resort, it had, 100 people or something like that. It was tiny. So for something this massive to happen was a really big deal. And obviously the police got involved straight away. Now, so I say Sheila had been staying at her friend's house. So her friend, Paula Seabolt, and her parents, they lived in the cabin opposite Cabin 28. Earlier on April 11th, the day before the murder, Paula had asked her parents if she could stay over at Sheila's at Cabin 28 to watch TV. Paula's mum, for some strange reason, she didn't like Sue Sharp. She didn't believe in how she raised her kids. She didn't approve. So she said no. So Paula then said, well, can Sheila stay over here tonight? So that's how Sheila stayed over at the Seabolts. So we don't actually know why Paula's mom disapproved of the Sharps. We don't know. So at the scene of the crime, they found a claw hammer, a bent steak knife, and there was an unidentified fingerprint on the handrail leading to the back door. The steak knife had been bent due to the pure force of being pushed into the victims. That's how much force was put. There was blood splatters everywhere. It was brutality. And actually, later on, down the line, there was another hammer found in a lake by Keddie. But that's by the by. Right, so the steak knife was actually taken from the Sharps' kitchen. Now, to me, that kind of says that it wasn't premeditated. It seems more like a murder of spontaneous anger.
Okay, yeah.
If you were going to murder somebody, presumably you bring your own kit. Also, that means that the killer would have to have been covered in blood because of all the blood splatters everywhere. Hard to kind of miss. However, it was the middle of the night, but there was a bar that was open quite late, so it was a bit of a risk walking down the street covered in blood. Again, still no sign of Tina, and there actually wouldn't be any sign of Tina until the 3rd year anniversary of the murders, when a anonymous caller rang the police station giving the location of Tina's remains and specifically said it was Tina's remains.
Okay.
Presumably the killer would be the only one who would know that.
Yeah. I mean, after 3 years...
Yeah.
You're not just going to see, like, skeletonized, surely.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was a skull. It was 50 miles from Keddie as well, which is kind of a long way to travel to dump somebody's body when you've just left 3 other bodies in the house where you've murdered them.
Yeah.
Which is kind of strange. Now, this anonymous call, was actually never taken into evidence. It was never analysed. They've still got the recording, but it was never analysed to see if the voice could be recognised or they could do any tracing. Yeah, strange.
Okay.
So, we may possibly have had one witness, which is Justin, who was the little boy's friend. Now, Justin Smart, his parents also lived on the Keddie resort. And Justin had said that first he said he dreamed it, and then he later retracted his statement and said that he does actually think he was awake. He claimed to see 2 men wearing gold-rimmed glasses, one tall, one short, and he heard fighting between Johnny, Dana, and these men, and then he saw the men taking Tina out of the back door.
Okay, that's quite specific, isn't it?
Well, I mean, to be fair, Justin was only really, really young. Like, you're talking 6 or 7. So
okay.
It's not like... do you know what I mean? Like, it's, I guess...
You're going to have to take it with a pinch of salt, really, because...
Yeah.
Especially if it's late night and he may have been dreaming, or in a fugue state kind of thing.
Exactly. So we know that it wasn't a robbery because they had no money. Sue was generally well-liked, so it wasn't like a hate crime. And Tina, missing. Tina was 13, so whatever weird people want to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some suspects. I mean, I say some. Generally, the police just quite fancied this one suspect and just kept at him, but he still got away with it. So the suspects that were mostly thought of were Martin Smart, who was Justin's dad, and his friend, Bo Babedi.
Okay.
Now, Bo was an ex-con, so he was already on the wrong side of the law. And Martin's wife, Marilyn, Martin was supposed to be a bit of a douchebag, and Marilyn was getting relationship counselling from Sue Sharp. So the theory is that Martin wasn't happy with Sue saying to Marilyn, "Why don't you just dump him? He's a douchebag," and and took her out.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's a tad on the extreme side.
Yeah, there's surely other ways you can go about.
Yeah, exactly.
Stopping you wives talking like that, I suppose.
Exactly. So also, Martin's wife did say that Martin hated Johnny Sharp, the oldest son, with a passion. Didn't say why, but apparently he just did. There's also the fact that Martin's son Justin was one of the people who were unharmed in the house, and it's alleged that Rick and Greg, the Sharp boys, were only unharmed as well because they were in the same room as Justin. So Martin wasn't going to kill his own son, but at the same time, he couldn't go into the room to kill Greg and Rick because Justin was in there with them.
Yeah.
Martin also told the police that he lost a blue-handled claw hammer from his house. It's like, I know I had a hammer around here somewhere. Where the hell is it? There was a hammer found at the scene, but it was not the hammer that Martin lost. The hammer that Martin lost was actually the one that was found in the Keddie Lake in 2016. So, like 30 years later. But also, if you're the killer, are you going to tell the police, oh, I lost a hammer. Is that one that you found at the crime scene mine?
Yeah.
Has it got M Smart written on it? Because that might be mine. I lost it. That's where I put it, next to the victims. The police at the time actually did think that it was more than one person, so they really, really fancied Martin and Beau for this. And he had a psychologist, he had a therapist as well, and Martin's therapist claimed that Martin actually outright confessed to the murders and that he passed the polygraph test because those things are easy to fool. But apparently the therapist's statement was also never taken into consideration.
Well, okay.
They also discovered a letter that was written from Martin to his wife, although Marilyn claimed that she'd never received it. But she did recognise his handwriting, and it said, "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives, and you say we're through."
I mean, what more did he need?
She left him, actually, the day after the murders because she was so completely convinced that him and Beau had done it. She said that night she'd come across the pair of them burning something in a wood stove.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
I mean,
what I thought there was errors in the Circleville case. What's happening?
So then
here?
everyone was... Exactly. They were like, it's clearly Martin, clearly. And then there was the whole, he never like got arrested for it or anything. And they were saying that, it's because he was best buddies with the sheriff. But it turns out that the sheriff wasn't friends with Martin at all. He just really didn't give a shit. To be honest, they did make a balls up of the entire case, clearly.
Yeah.
In fact, the guy who, the father of Sheila's friend, Paula, James Seabolt, he actually, he kind of went round the side of the house and opened the bedroom window to get the boys out without having to take them through the living room to see the bodies of their relatives. And he did say that he, at first, went through the back door and walked right across the crime scene just to make sure that nobody was alive. So he's already contaminated the crime scene. But the fingerprint they found on the outside rail didn't belong to James Seabolt, and it did not belong to Martin Smart. So we still have an unidentified fingerprint that they just went, whatever. It's just a fingerprint in it. Let's not do anything with it. So there's so many things about that just doesn't, like, for me, killing your wife's mate because she's given your wife relationship advice is extreme. Why also would Martin tell the police he'd lost a hammer unless he was really, really dumb? Also, Justin Smart saw 2 men wearing gold-rimmed glasses, which Martin didn't wear glasses. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, he could have put a pair of glasses on, but it doesn't sound like he was smart enough to have thought that far ahead. And presumably Justin would recognise his own dad if he saw him.
Yeah, you'd hope.
Yeah. So why was the lead with the 2 gold-rimmed glasses men not pursued? And then why would they not just kill Tina where they were? But why did they take, if it was Martin and Beau, why would they take Tina 50 miles out of Keddie to then kill her and dump her body? Why not just kill her in the house with the others? You're clearly not bothered about people finding the victims.
Yeah.
And if Justin is right in saying that he saw one of these men take Tina out the back door, did she not put up a fight? Did she know these people personally enough to trust them to go with them? Did this happen before Dana and Johnny started fighting with people?
Yeah, because if the wife saw them two burning stuff later on, then where did they put Tina?
Exactly. I mean, presumably in a wood stove you burn wood, so I mean, they could have just been burning stuff, because it's a wood stove and that's what you do. You put it on and you get heat out of it.
Yeah, but if it's them two and they've taken Tina out of that house, they've obviously got something in mind to do with her.
Exactly, something insidious, right?
Yeah, so then if the wife has seen them, if the wife's left them the next day, then there's a small window with what they've done with Tina, and then for her to end up 50 miles away, there's not enough time to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For unless they've got a place where they kept her, or they did something nefarious with her and then killed her away from the scene and then kept her somewhere, then drove her 50 miles away or whatever. But it makes no sense why they've taken her away but then left the other three there.
Exactly. And there's also the fact that Sue Sharp was naked from the waist down, but I didn't read anywhere if it said that she was raped or not. So that kind of doesn't make any sense either. Like, you could understand maybe if they'd raped Sue, that maybe they took Tina away to do the same thing. Maybe they needed some more time and they needed somewhere where they didn't think they would get found, maybe. But there was no evidence that Sue had been raped. It didn't say anywhere. And it just doesn't, I don't know, how did everyone in the neighbourhood, the amount of force of these murders, honestly, there was blood everywhere, how did nobody wake up?
Yeah, if they bent a knife, steak knife, just with the force, and using a claw hammer, I mean, if you're using a hammer, you're not going to be tapping very lightly, are you? You're going to be putting some force into it, and then
exactly
there's the whole noise and effort that goes into that.
I mean, there was a rumour, completely unsubstantiated. There is absolutely no evidence about this whatsoever, but there was a rumour that to supplement her income, Sue actually used to sell her body, and that one possible theory could be that she pissed off a client who, killed her. Which might explain, why she was half naked, because I think Johnny and Dana had been out partying and they came home late that night, and I think somebody was already in the house. From what Justin's story was kind of piecing together, somebody was already in the house. I think basically starting on Sue, and Johnny and Dana just kind of
So that's why they were fighting with people, because they'd walked in on it, kind of thing.
Yeah. But I feel like that's more of a plausible theory than Martin. I feel like I know all the evidence points so badly at Martin, but I don't think it doesn't really sound like he was smart enough to have premeditated a murder.
It's just too easy, isn't it? Because I've seen this case in other places as well, and you do have to think, well, yeah, it's got to be him, because he's upset that his wife's getting advice, and he's got the ex-criminal staying with him. Mm-hmm. But then, all right, he's wrote a letter saying he's killed 4 people and he's confessed to the shrink. But I mean, like you say, it just seems too easy. And when the police have gone, no, we're not touching that, then there's got to be a reason for it. You know what I mean? You
could have had an open and shut case. There's never all the facts. If that was the thing. There's no evidence whatsoever that the sheriff was friends. Apparently, the sheriff had said that he wasn't a friend of Martin's, and that Martin and Marilyn were having relationship advice and they came to him for help. I don't know.
I mean, I think that just sums up the kind of person Martin is in that respect, is because he's gone to someone in authority to try and sort his marriage out. That's kind of his mindset, not the relationship counselling, but, well, the sheriff knows best, we'll go to him. That kind of mentality. I don't want to say simple, but it's hard not to.
I know what
really.
you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like maybe they were just a bit blinkered and like they connected dots that maybe were just a coincidence between Martin and the murder. Yes, there is so much evidence against him, but they brought him in for questioning. They took his fingerprints, and his fingerprint didn't match the fingerprint on site. The hammer didn't belong to him. It was the hammer in the lake. They used a kitchen knife from the Sharp's own kitchen. He did not. I feel like he wouldn't have gone into that if he wanted to go in and just be, pissed off and murder somebody. Like, bring your own stuff that you can ditch later. Don't use stuff that's already in the kitchen and then leave everything on site.
I mean, yeah.
It's
because if you're in that kind of mindset, if you're going over to talk to Sue and say, stop talking to my wife kind of thing, and even then it escalates and you end up murdering all of them, then you're gonna it's in the moment, but you're gonna panic and try and get rid of the evidence.
Of course.
Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you kind of going in premeditated, then you're gonna have a plan. You're not gonna just pick up a knife.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like it was a spur of the moment thing, but I don't feel like it was Martin and
No,
Bo.
because if they were next door neighbours, if their own son was in the house,
exactly,
you're obviously going to try and make and not make evidence disappear, but just
tidy up a bit.
Yeah, you're not gonna leave stuff about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All fingers would point in your direction.
The only way you're going to leave stuff lying about is if you're not connected to the place. If no one is going to recognise you, and you're quite confident you can walk in and out of that place and not be recognised, not be seen, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's.
And I mean, how many times have people rang up the police with fucking false confessions where, oh, I murdered so-and-so, I'm Jack the Ripper and shit like that. People just do it for the bloody crack, don't they? They don't. So, I mean, the fact that this therapist's statement was never taken into account kind of really speaks volumes to me that maybe they were like, you think maybe Martin's just telling a little bit of a fib there. Yeah, like he's not all there.
Yeah, maybe he's just trying to get a rise out of people, a therapist, and as well with a letter. I think that it's kind of one of them. Look what I've done for you. Please don't leave me, kind of thing.
The thing is, as well, though, she said that Marilyn recognised Martin's handwriting in this letter that she apparently never received, but. She hated him. She absolutely hated him. So she's got no incentive whatsoever to go, oh, that doesn't look like Martin's handwriting at all. She could easily be like, are you going to put him away? Is he going to jail? Yeah, he's definitely going to go to jail if he murdered these people. Well, that is definitely his writing. I would recognise it anyway. Yeah. She had no incentive to defend him.
Yeah.
So I don't trust anything that Marilyn has said. She also said that she found Tina's jacket in their basement. But again, no record of it.
Yeah, you'd hand that in if it's...
Yeah. I don't trust anything she said. I don't trust anything that the therapist said. I don't think really Martin was smart enough to get away with it. With all the stuff that he said and all the fingers that were pointed, I really do think that it had to have been an outsider.
Yeah. It's... The more that you're actually, like... talking about it, the more that I think that maybe, again, speculation, but maybe it was a client of hers who has been...
The evidence is like too obvious for them to not go, yeah, we know exactly who's done it, we'll close this case. For them to go, we're not sure.
Yeah.
That speaks to me like it can't possibly have been Martin, and that this is just putting coincidences together that do not point in the direction of the killer.
Yeah, there's...
I mean, also, Dana, he was slightly older than Johnny, and somebody in the town nearby had actually said that Dana had stole $4,000 worth of LSD. So they could have been embroiled in drugs or anything, you know? You've nicked $4,000 worth of LSD. Again, there was no claims to substantiate it. It was just hearsay. But if he stole $4,000 worth of LSD, yeah, you're gonna have drug dealers on your back, and that's not a good place to be.
I mean, if you get robbed of $4,000 worth of LSD, you can't really go to the police.
Exactly.
So yeah,
yeah. So yeah, on the face of everything, this case does seem really open and shut. But when you dig a little bit deeper, it seems like the facts do not point in the direction of the suspects.
Yeah, there's a lot of cases that it seems so obvious, but then it's not. And one of them as well, like the police don't release all the details of the case to the public.
Again, yeah, of course.
There's a reason behind it that they don't do that. Yeah. So you can just get the broad strokes of it and go, well, it's got to be that. But the police, this is their job, they'd look into this, and if they don't think there's enough evidence to substantiate that these two people did it, then as much as it wounds you that there's literally two killers, or at least a killer out there who's killed 4 people and gone free, that it's not the people that you want it to be, kind of thing.
Yeah. And actually the new sheriff he reopened the case. Not that it was ever really closed, but he has started actively looking into it from 2013. Apparently they have found some DNA recently, which they're looking into. So maybe at some point the case might be solved, or there might be new leads. But he's opened it up again, and he's not. It doesn't seem to be like he's going in Martin Smart's direction. So it sounds like he has his own theories too.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, there is no statute of limitations on murder, at least, and I think one of the things that I did see him say was they've got a duty, as long as there's surviving relatives, they got a duty to provide closure for them.
Well, Sheila is still alive.
Yeah. So it's hopefully this will be solved one day.
Yeah, and if it turns out that Martin Smart killed the Sharps just because he didn't want them bitching to his wife, I'm going to be so infuriated.
Well, yeah.
Because I'll have looked at it the complete wrong way. You know, Occam's razor, sometimes the most simple answer is the obvious one. Yeah. I don't want it to be that in this case.
Yeah, it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, swims like a duck. It's not a pigeon, is it?
Yeah, I really wanted to, for them to actually to catch an actual killer.
Hopefully they will do.
Yeah, and if there's a Netflix 4-part series in 6 months about the Keddie Cabin Murders and they've solved it and it wasn't Martin Smart, you heard it here first.
Indeed. Yes.
And we've done it again.
We're just on a roll with these.
Yeah. And MI6, I can send you my CV at any time.
Oh, they've already got that. Jesus. Don't worry about it.
They put it in the bin.
Yeah, they've taken it off your hard drive and gone, oh, right, okay. Oh, God, no.
They're like, she's got a fire safety certificate. Great. Good stuff.
That's what we need, another fire marshal in this place. On that bombshell.
Yes.
So, yeah, that was the Circleville Writer and the Keddie Cabin Murders. And next week, we're going to be talking about cults. There's an L in there, as my autocorrect refuses to recognise. So, have you decided who you are going to be focusing on?
Well, actually, I have a bit of a strange one that I actually don't know anything about. I just came across it when I was perusing YouTube yesterday. And it's the cult of the Birdman. And it's an ancient cult. So I think I would like to look into that one. Interesting, right?
The cult of the Birdman. And I am going to be doing Shinriko. who were amongst one of their many claims to fame is they were responsible for the 1995 sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway. Yeah, so this was kind of it was in our lifetime, but this was when I was aware of the news cycle, and it was something that kind of didn't get me interested in cults, but kind of drew me into that there was these kind of people out there.
Ooh, intriguing.
It is quite intriguing, to be honest with you, and it's a whole story. But
nice.
But yeah, so we'll be talking about that next week. But this has been the MO podcast for now. I've been Contumacious Anne.
And I have been Atreya.
And thank you very much for joining us, and we shall see you next time.
The MO
Thanks for
podcast.
listening. Bye.
The MO podcast. The MO podcast. The MO podcast.